What's up? This is Josh coming at you from Scratch DJ Academy here in New York City, and today we're going to talk about how to add stereo imaging to your mixes. So what I have here is I have a session that I prepared before I came in today. It's a collaboration that I'm working on with another artist. I got a few tracks here, and what I really want to focus on is something that I see a lot here at the Academy. A lot of beginning producers keep everything centered in their mix. Now this is going to be a real short lesson today, but I want to talk about the importance of using the full stereo spectrum when you're working on your tracks. So as you can see here, we have all these different pieces of audio, samples, and MIDI that I put together. What I want to focus on though is, if you notice here on the side, everything on our stereo mix is centered. We're looking at the panning, and I'll just do a little left, a little right here to kind of see what I'm talking about. Alright? So here's a sample of the track we're going to be working on today, before any mixing is done to it. I tell my students here at the Academy that one of the most important things is imagining your production as an actual piece of art, alright? So you have a big canvas to use, and I find a lot of beginning producers kind of focus on one particular piece of the entire canvas, and that's kind of what the stereo imaging piece is, and you can do a lot with just the basic plugins that come in Ableton. Alright, so you guys get the idea. So what I'm going to start off here is I'm going to start with the most important things that we like to focus on, which in this particular piece is the drums. I would say in a lot of electronic music, hip-hop music, that kind of thing, the drums are an intricate part, if not the most important piece of the entire puzzle when it comes to the production. On the audio track 1 here, I'm going to go ahead and rename this to kick. And the reason I want to focus on the kick drum first is because it's the most important piece. It kind of stands out. Alright, it's the kick, it's the bass, it rumbles, that kind of thing. Now as you can see, I already have a couple pieces and plugins on here that we had talked about in previous lessons with the saturator and the EQ. But what I want to focus on now is using the utility tool. Now Ableton's kind of weird, and we had talked about the utility tool before. It kind of takes everything and spreads it evenly across the stereo spectrum. What I want to do with the utility tool is I want to narrow the entire focus. So what you want to think about is the stereo spectrum as like a semicircle around from your ears all the way around the front of you, alright? And what Ableton does is it kind of, or any stereo mix is going to put it at an even distributed out of the left speaker and the right speaker. And we want to kind of narrow that down to focus in the middle of that semicircle, alright? So I'm going to go ahead and do that first with the utility tool, and I'm going to narrow this down to about 30%. So in our entire spectrum, 180 degrees, it's sitting about right in the middle, just a little bit left and right of center. That's how the speakers are going to create that noise. Now, when the speakers vibrate, they make different parts of the puzzle, right? They put different pieces, and that's what you're hearing. So with our kick sitting in the middle, it's going to really be the full force is coming out of the middle of the speakers, and that's what we want. Same with our vocals, right? Our vocals are a mono source. When we record them, we want them to sit in the middle. Now this particular project, we don't have any vocals that are standing out, but we want to focus on that as part of the piece of the puzzle too, if we were to add them at a later time. So the next thing I want to focus on is the hi-hat, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and play this for you and let you guys hear what the hi-hat's doing. All right, we got a couple hi-hats in there, some tambourines, what have you, whatever. So the next thing I'm going to do with this is it's kind of my own personal thing that I like to do. I use the auto pan. Depending on the genre of music, you can push them a little left or a little right in the stereo spectrum here. But what I'm going to focus on is I want them to kind of pan and back and forth in the user's or the listener's ear. So I'm going to go here and I'm add in the auto pan. Okay. Now if we look here, we can see on the auto pan a couple different options that we have. It's a pretty basic plugin. It doesn't really do much. Just kind of automatically goes between the left and right speaker, and we can determine how much of that spread goes between each speaker. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to focus on the amount, and I'm going to do about 70%. With the 70%, if we play it, you can kind of hear it bouncing back and forth between each speaker right now. All right. Now somebody might ask, why is it a big deal? What's that really do? Well, it actually opens up space for our kick that's sitting center to not clash with our hi-hats that are sitting left and right. So think of, again, semicircle, these are sitting right here, our hi-hats are bouncing right here on each side. Alright? So as far as competing for space, they're not really competing for anything, which is kind of nice, and they're two different dynamics. We have a high dynamic and a real low dynamic, and we want the low dynamic to really set forward and be that punchiness. Alright, so with the stereo imaging on our kick drum and our bass and on our hi-hat, I'm going to give you a little comparison to what we did earlier before we added any effects on there. So what I'm gonna do too is in this production, I kind of got this little bell in the background that's going on here as well. I'm gonna solo this out and play it for you guys real quick. So again, sitting centered in our mix. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the same thing here, just to add a little flavor and keep it feel like it's moving forward. I'm gonna go ahead and add the auto pan on this as well and have it kind of pan back and forth between each speaker, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do the opposite here of our hi-hat, and I'm gonna put in invert. So instead of starting with our left speaker, we're going to start with our right speaker. It's going to start there and then bounce back to the other side. All right, so opposite of the hi-hat. That way you have two different things going on. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I'm going to put this at about 50%. I don't want to do quite the full stereo spread. Again, finding a slot within that semicircle of the stereo spectrum like we've been talking about. So let's go ahead and play this again to kind of feel the difference between the two. And as you can see, it gives it more movement, more feel. All right, so with that, we talked about primarily the percussion elements, bells, hi-hats, kick drum, but now I want to focus on one of the melody elements with our synthesizer here in the project. Now, if you listen to this, I'm going to go ahead and play it back. It's kind of drowned out by our bass, right? So again, sitting evenly distributed in the mix. So what we're looking at is this sound right here. So drown it out, all right? So one of the known mixing techniques in music, especially with rock music and different things like that, with string instruments, is doing what they call a hard pan left and right, all right? And what that does is it pushes its own melody to each left and right speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So on my track 28 here of the pluck sound we have, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the track. All right. So as you can see, I duplicated everything. Just Command D duplicates the track, keeps all of my plugins the same that I already have on our pluck effect here. And the reason I'm comparing this to a string, even though it's a synth instrument, is because of the pluckiness of the sound. It has a very quick attack. Very small release, ends right away. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and push this 40% right here, and then on our duplicated track, 40% left. Again, spreading it out on that semicircle that we were talking about. All right, so now let's see the difference. So as you can see, quite a big difference there, right? They're not competing for that space anymore. They're evenly distributed left and right. So now it stands out a little bit more. It's a little bit crisper. So that's our lesson today. I just want to go over a couple quick tips and reminders. Remember that when you're mixing, everything's in a stereo spectrum, right? So think about a semicircle from your ears right around the front of your face. And each individual piece sits in a certain spot in that stereo field. So it's important to create dynamics and create different feelings in your mix by pushing things a little left, a little right, or in some cases, doing a hard pan left and right depending on the instrument. This has been Josh from Scratch DJ Academy, 1/2 of Statik Link here in New York City. I want to thank y'all for tuning in.